How are you? All right. Good evening, everybody.
Keith.
Hi, Keith. Just getting started. All right.
Okay.
For the record, it's 5:15 p.m. on Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. Time for the regular meeting of the Wenatchee City Council. I'll call the meeting to order. As usually, we start with the pledge to our flag. I think I'll go ahead and lead us this time, if that's all right. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And for roll call this evening, we have 6 council members present, and we have Councilmember Huffaker on the phone with us, so we do have a quorum. First item on our agenda tonight are the consent items, which includes approval of the agenda, the vouchers, and the minutes from the previous meetings, and the appointment of Alan Beidler to the Housing Authority of Chelan County.
Your Honor, I'd make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda consisting of this evening's agenda, the vouchers, minutes from previous meetings, and to adopt Resolution 2020-10 to approve the reappointment of Alan Beidler to the Housing Authority of Chelan County and the City of Wenatchee Board for an additional 3-year term ending April 2023.
Second?
A motion by Councilmember Kulas and a second by Councilmember Bailey to approve this evening's consent items, including the agenda, vouchers, and the minutes from the previous meeting, and to adopt Resolution number 2020-10 to approve the reappointment of Alan Beidler to the Housing Authority of Chelan County and the City of Wenatchee Board for an additional 3-year term ending April 2023. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We have a few action items this evening. So the first is regarding ratifying actions of the mayor during our emergency proclamation. So Laura, do you want to come up and present item A?
Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. The item before you is resolution number 2020-11. This is the continuing actions of ratifying those items related to COVID. So for this agenda, we have 3 items. The first of which is for the Finance Department, which changed its work hours originally from 9 to 2, but has now revised them from 9 to 4:30 in order to be able to address all of the additional calls regarding utility payments and whatnot that are still essential services. The second item is effective April 2. The mayor ordered the city's playgrounds and picnic shelters that were closed and or fenced off from use. Certain equipment was removed, such as basketball hoops and whatnot, so that we could further social distancing practices. And then signage was also set up in our different facilities, warning against the COVID pandemic, and then providing some options for social distancing at the parks and trails. And then lastly, since the Wenatchee Community Center was closed, there were several tenants that are not able to use the center and but still have lease payments. And so we have forgiven those payments during this time as they are not able to use the center. Those are the 3 items for today, and we're asking that the council adopt the resolution to ratify those actions.
And I think we've really sort of slowed down in emergency sort of things to do. I think we've sort of got most of the stuff out there, and I think like the parks thing's actually working out pretty well. I know we had lots of complaints early on about basketball games and stuff going on, and I think the steps we've taken have sort of slowed down quite a bit of the public interaction that I think people were concerned about. So, and I really haven't heard much on the hiking trails and other stuff lately either, so I think we're doing a pretty good job.
So I have a question in regards to the tenants. I just want to make sure that by adopting this resolution, we're not gifting public funds by
setting aside the rent.
Steve Smith, are we gifting public funds by setting aside rent at the community center?
Yeah, mute.
Well, I mean, that's a potential issue. I think given the emergency situation and the nature of those tenants, that I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, I think the emergency declaration sort of fixes most of those things.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it gives us some extraordinary, to deal with this extraordinary situation. I mean, it's not something we'd want to do regularly, but, in an emergency situation, I think we can do these kind of things.
we did see some additional guidance from agencies in terms of the gifting of public funds to assist and during this time, and there have been some exceptions, and they've allowed for some flexibility in that, and so this is an instance where it's, agencies that are nonprofits and whatnot, they just cannot pay and do not have those options. So as Steve Smith mentioned, I don't think it's a future practice, but during right now, there's that flexibility.
Okay.
And the Attorney General wrote an opinion a number of
That's-
weeks ago,
yeah.
right when this first started, that basically, I think, threw everything out. I think he said, do whatever you want.
Oh,
I mean, literally, I think it was pretty wide open in terms of government giving any way we felt like we needed to deal with this situation to do it. So I'm fairly comfortable with what it is we're doing.
Great, thank you.
Yep. All right, so I would entertain a motion if we had one.
Your Honor, I move for City Council to adopt Resolution Number 2020-11 to ratify the following actions that have occurred under the Mayor's authority under the emergency proclamation for COVID-19, including revising the adjusted hours for the Finance Department from 9 a.m. to 4:30, including revising the adjusted hours for the Finance Department from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., closing and/or fencing off playgrounds and picnic shelters, removing certain equipment, and installing signage related to the closed facilities and social distancing at the city's parks and trails, and providing financial relief to the Wenatchee Community Center tenants from their lease payments during the period of the emergency closure.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Harold and a second by Councilmember Cuevas to adopt Resolution 2020-11 to ratify actions related to COVID-19 under the mayor's authority under emergency proclamation for COVID-19, including revising the adjusted hours for the Finance Department from 9 to 4:30 p.m., closing and/or fencing off playgrounds and picnic shelters, removing certain equipment, installing signage related to the closed facilities and social distancing at the city parks and trails, and providing financial relief to the Wenatchee Community Center tenants from their lease payments during the period of the emergency closure. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Charlotte, nice to have you back. She does get the Mask of the Year award. And we've got a little update on our ecology work on Saddle Rock. Charlotte, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so this is an amendment to the agreed order we have with ecology for Saddle Rock. I think most of you maybe know the history of Saddle Rock, but it used to be a DNR property, and folks could have mining claims there. And so there are these tailing piles from mining that have elevated levels of arsenic in them. And so we have a Department of Ecology MOTCA grant to remove those piles from Saddle Rock. So this amendment will address the scope of work for the phase 2. Phase 1 was last year, and this is the final phase of this. Any questions? So I will be bringing, once we get this signed, with your permission, then I will come back with the grant agreement from Ecology for phase 2.
Okay. And we talked about it at Finance Committee, and this all makes sense, and not going to happen in 2020, but probably 2021 construction.
Correct.
And then Charlotte promises me that because we're into it for $212,000, that the trail will be worth $212,000 more and be in better shape.
We will leave it better than we found it.
Excellent.
Charlotte, I had just a couple of questions. First of all, the primary thing that you're after up there is arsenic, is that right? The other
Yes.
elements that were listed here are at or below EPA or
Correct.
ecology standards.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it's just the arsenic
Mhm.
they're concerned about. The second thing is, when I look at the map, for that phase 2 up there, follow the yellow line, follow the yellow brick road there. When that goes into operation, I assume those are going to be trucks that are going clear up to the top left-hand corner up there.
Yeah.
So what is going to be the condition? Saddle Rock will be closed off, and for how long?
So we haven't done that engineering yet to know exactly how long it's going to take. We're still working on just getting the grant signed, but we are going to do some evaluation into seeing if we can realign parts of the trail, because the trail is, as you know, quite steep in some parts, and so there's that one section that's at a really steep grade that has really deep ruts in it, so we're going to realign that. And so we're still kind of in the looking at how it's going to be done sort of phase. But yeah, we're going to have to close all of Saddle Rock. I think we could probably leave the Jacobson side open, the Rack side open, but it would just have to turn people around at a certain point. So we'll have to look into that and see if it's worth it or not. But yeah, I would plan on 2 or 3 months closure. That's conservative. I don't think it'll be that long, but it could be.
How long was it closed last time?
We had it
4 weeks?
closed. Yeah, like 6 weeks, but that was the lower half
Right.
portion. So this is going to be a little more tricky because it's just one remaining pile, but they got to get all the way up and over the top and, up this steep part and down it.
I guess my question, and this is probably beyond the scope of what we're really having to deal with tonight, but the amount of realignment and roads and those kinds of things, that there's going to be a lot of that's going to have to, I assume, have to be undone when you're on, or are you going to leave that road all?
No, our plan
Is
is.
that going to be basically a fire access road and that kind of thing?
No, our plan is to realign the trail to a less steep grade so that the trail is more sustainable. We're also going to fix drainage issues. There's spots that are washed out, so we'll put some culverts in and that sort of thing. And so then that will be the trail.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a small section to access that pile at the top that we're going to have to build a temporary road, but we're going to restore the ground, and then it will be just not trail.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So when we're done with this, will it be a 2-lane road with gravel on it that will become the hiking trail?
Not a 2-lane for sure.
Excuse me, well, two wheels, 1 lane.
Yeah, it'd be something that you could get an articulated dump truck up.
Okay,
We're not sure we're going to be able to get it to, where you could take your Ford Taurus up
Right.
it, but and the land trust also, we've been in talks with them, and they said they have some money they might be able to put into the project to put rock on the trail, so that would be cool.
okay. Perfect. All right, any other questions for Charlotte? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Well, Your Honor, I'd make an amendment to the agreed order excuse me, for the Washington State Department of Ecology for Gold Knob Prospect Site, also known as Saddle Rock Park. Authorize the mayor to sign Amendment 1 to the agreed order number DE 15823 between the City of Wenatchee and the State of Washington Department of Ecology for the Gold Knob Prospect Site, also known as Saddle Rock Park.
Have a motion, do we have a second? Second. Motion by Councilmember Bailey, second by Councilmember Hornby, to authorize the mayor to sign Amendment 1 to the agreed order number DE 15823 between the City of Wenatchee and the State of Washington Department of Ecology for the Gold Knob Prospect Site, also known as Saddle Rock Park. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. For the folks on the phone, if you could mute, we're getting quite a bit of feedback today. So if you could leave your phones on mute until you have to talk, and I'll give you guys some time. That might help us here a little bit. Thank you. Next item is a use agreement for Local-Tel to provide Wi-Fi into the park. Charlotte, you got that one too?
I do. Yep, so Local-Tel approached the city and has asked to be able to provide free Wi-Fi to park visitors at Kiwanis Methow Park at no expense to the city. And so we have negotiated an agreement between Local-Tel and the city. Steve Smith has reviewed it, and yeah, so that's what that is. Also, just so you know, we're in talks with them right now. They'd like to do that in other parks in the city. So, assuming you approve this one, then I'll probably be bringing more agreements to you as well. So we will be filtering, in case you're worried about that, the content. We've asked Local-Tel, there's a list of things in there that will be filtered.
Yeah, it was, I think I was approached by Mario Cantu from the PUD about whether or not we could light up the park with fiber. And then I went to Dimitri and he said, fine. And then I think staffs have been working on it for quite a little while. So I think
That's
the
August.
PUD dropped the fiber line in for free. Local-Tel is going to light it up for free. And then if you're in the park there, you'll have access to Wi-Fi.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I think they're going to try to do more of those. Yeah.
That's such a generous thing of them to do, and they have been such a great partner to the city.
Yeah.
I just really appreciate them.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll do more of those things. And we've had a couple of phone calls. The school district's having some troubles right now. They've got all these kids all have laptops at home, and there's a whole bunch of folks who don't have access to the internet. So I know the school districts got free Wi-Fi in and around their school, so if people kids that can drive up and get there, they can access. And then I think the parks are going to have them eventually in just some way for more members of the public to get access to the internet. And I think the school district is finding a real struggle with that. I know Laura was on a phone call with them. I was on for part of it, just trying to figure out how to make sure there's access for things you and I think that everyone has, and not everyone has them.
It looks like we'll be able to do Memorial Park pretty easily. Where I'm meeting with them tomorrow out on site to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Charlotte,
I just have a couple of comments about it. I'm not sure what the demand for it was initially, why we needed that, but on the surface, it just seems wrong to have a recreation place where we're encouraging people to get out and exercise and enjoy the fresh out air and do physical activity, and now we're providing Wi-Fi access so they can sit on their phones at a park as well as at home or other places that provide it. So it just seems a little wrong. I'm not sure what the demand for it was. On the flip side of it, if we are doing this, are we able to also incorporate camera systems in that we'd like to have at all of our parks to monitor activity?
So we already have park cameras at this park, so they're there and they're lit, so that's not a problem. And I think there are those that parks are used for lots of things, and even if it's having a picnic or if you're going to go out and read a newspaper online or something, better off doing it outside than inside. So I don't see any harm to allowing Wi-Fi in the parks if people want to use them. So I thought it was a generous offer by Local-Tel and then the PUD to get it there. So, and yeah, they have to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that they were willing to do this, and I don't have a problem with them putting up a sign that says it's provided by Local-Tel and all that. It just seems like, gosh, we should be encouraging recreation instead of electronic use at a park. But I don't have a big enough problem for it. Just wanted to make the comment.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think will happen eventually at some point, there'll be some of these food trucks and stuff around there, so they'll be able to take the scanners and be able to do the internet stuff that way too. So, yeah.
And it will be, as I understand here, the hours of the park, at 10 o'clock, they flip the switch and it That goes dark, right?
Correct, yeah, there won't be Wi-Fi available in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
We saw that as maybe a possible problem. so,
Yeah, I would think that that would make it be a significant problem.
Yeah, so
Don't think
it will
Local
not
drug
be
dealer,
available.
doing business in the park, kind of thing, yeah. On our dime, or
Right.
local tells dime, I guess.
Yeah.
So is it going to be open web for any website, or is it going to be all block off areas where you're not supposed to get on?
So if you look in the agreement, there's a list. We've negotiated a list, and we also worked with the city's IS department to kind of look at things that we filter for. And so this would, that inherit, gambling, nudity, pornography, child abuse, hacking, malicious websites, and phishing will all be filtered out.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
And as it says, I'm going to have the opportunity to add to the list if we find a
Right,
problem.
Right, so our current plan is to have a 90-day follow-up meeting from when the Wi-Fi starts, just to check in and make sure everybody's still happy and that it's functioning as we envisioned it.
How far does it reach out? I mean, how do you control how far out? I mean,
That depends on the equipment, and that is not my specialty, and so I would have to defer to local tel for that.
okay. Tim, any?
You can modify the range,
uh,
like 50%. Only go so far.
Yeah.
All right, any questions for Charlotte? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I make a motion for the city council to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement with Localtel to provide free Wi-Fi to the park visitors of Kiwanis Methow, at no expense to the city.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Hornby, second by Councilmember Esparza, to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement with Localtel to provide free Wi-Fi to park visitors at Kiwanis Methow Park at no expense to the city. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Charlotte. Rob, you doing the contracts?
For the most part, I think we've got Jake and Jacob on the phone as well.
Oh, good.
calling in.
We have Jake and Jacob on the phone?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
So,
Nick Tyler, Engineering Services Manager. Sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
yeah, okay, so we're going to do the 9th Street parking lot first. All right, Jacob, go ahead.
Okay. So the item that's in front of you is for the 9th Street parking lot project. That project proposes to pave the gravel lot at the intersection of 9th Street and Walla Walla and add 63 new parking stalls. That site's currently owned by the PUD and is utilized by the Wenatchee Row Paddle Club through a lease with the PUD. According to some discussion that was had at Finance Committee today, the city's had an interest in providing day-use parking at that location for many years. And to facilitate that, we entered into an interlocal agreement with the PUD in April of 2018. The terms of that agreement were that the city would construct and finance the project, and the PUD will own and maintain it in perpetuity after construction. RH2 performed the design work, and the design work was done in coordination with the PUD and the Wenatchee Row Paddle Club. And the project was advertised for bids on March 18th of this year. The city received 9 bids, with J&K Earthworks, the lowest bidder. Their bid came in about 3.8% below the engineer's estimate. Of J&K's $551,000 bid, the city is responsible for just over $516,000, with the rest being the responsibility of the Wenatchee Row Paddle Club as part of some improvements they need to make in their lease with the PUD. In terms of schedule, the project includes 40 working days. We currently have it in the contract that it will not start until the governor's order for stay home, stay healthy is lifted. And so we will be anxious to get that project started as soon as we receive word from the governor. Staff recommends the council award the project to J&K Earthworks. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I have a question for Brad. Is this LRF funded? It is, isn't it? The city portion? Okay. So that's paid for with the special tax dollars we get from the state for our waterfront development. So it's not a general fund item.
I have a question. I'm not real good at math. Could you give me a little bit on the difference between, we started out, I think that project started at about, what, 350,000. We ended up at 650 and whatever, but essentially the comment there that the thing is, kind of, I don't see the numbers adding up there in terms of the 650,000. Is that the fact that we've already spent a certain amount of money and this is the actual doing it, but that the engineering and all that other stuff was part of another contract?
I would say the answer to that is yes. All right, who do we have design this?
RH2 designed this project. So the project budget that's shown in the council agenda item includes everything, design, construction, and construction administration as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I think there was a time where sometime last year we were mathing this out and it was going to be a couple $100,000 more than this. And then the PUD came back and they wanted 8 feet of asphalt and we agreed to 3 inches or I don't know, there was some, whatever they wanted it built to nuclear substandards and we built it to something. So we got an agreement we got to do it for a little bit less. Rob, you want to?
I recall the details were we're building it to a parking lot standard and not to a particularly like a heavy truck road standard.
Okay.
Probably the best way to think of it.
Okay. So I know we've been talking about this since Riverside 9 was built, that we would try to get some, and this is going to be day use parking only, not overnight parking. And I'm not exactly sure who's supposed to regulate that, whether that's the city police department, but it'll be a city parking lot with, for day use with access to the park. So any other questions for Jacob, who's on the line, or Rob, who's here? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for the City Council to award the construction contract for the 9th Street parking lot project number 1805 to J&K Earthworks LLC in the amount of $551,580.91 and authorize the mayor to sign the contract documents.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Esparza, second by Councilmember Harold, to award the construction contract for the 9th Street parking lot project number 1805 to J&K Earthworks LLC in the amount of $551,580.91 and authorize the mayor to sign the contract documents. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Now, going to business as usual. The next contract is for our 2020 pavement preservation project. As you remember, this was the year that we were going to do the bigger one and more residential streets and some additional sidewalk work. And we originally budgeted 4.7 million. And then with the I-976 passing, we brought it down to 3.7 million with design. And so this is went to bid and the bids came back pretty good. So time to issue a contract. So I guess I'll give this over to Jake Lewing. Jake, you on the phone?
Yes, I am. And yeah, you did most of the heavy lifting for me already, but we, as you mentioned, this was, we did get some good bids. We had a lot of miles of pavement that was identified by our pavement preservation project or our pavement management program. Early on in this project, we hired a consultant. We went out and did a lot of borings and site investigations to really get a better cost estimate from what our pavement management program identified. Through that process, we whittled it down to pick the best streets to get the best bang for our buck. And then we did that process again whenever I-976 passed, and that's what we ended up with. We actually put together a base bid schedule and then included a couple alternates in the event that bid prices did come in good and we could maximize the amount of pavement we were able to do. And that happened. We got bid prices that were a little bit better than our engineer's estimate. We got 3 bids, including one from Ellensburg that bid online, which is a new thing that we did this round of projects in light of the current climate. And the low bidder was Central Washington Asphalt, and we were able to get them to bid for the base bid Schedule A plus one of our bid alternates, which included a couple more street segments. So we are doing a little over, I think, 35 individual segments of roadway, several miles, and replacing about a little over 200 curb ramps along the sidewalk. So quite a bit of work. So I'm here just requesting that City Council award the contract to Central Washington Asphalt and authorize the mayor to sign the construction contract documents in the amount of $3,027,649. And I'm glad to answer any of the questions about this project.
Hey, Jake, I wanted to, this is Rob, just highlight real quickly there for a couple of our new council members. So looking at the numbers, it looks like it's well over 300,000 that we're investing in new ADA compliant curb ramps. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there's last year we did a chip seal, and when we do a chip seal, that type of resurfacing, you don't have to do any work to the adjacent ADA facilities or sidewalks. This year's project is a thin overlay. We're grinding the edges of the roadway and putting an inch of new asphalt on all the roadways, as well as digging out any areas that have failed. And with this kind of construction, we are required by law to upgrade any crossing of the roadway to make it ADA compliant. And so with that, we're required to replace about 200 curb ramps as part of this project.
And the reason I bring this up is because we're in the midst right now of an ADA transition plan that we're required to do by the federal government. And so we'll have a goal of so much to invest per year, and you could be over 30 or 50 years, but this is the type of thing that will highlight, like our preservation program will replace ramps, so many ramps per year, so on. So I just wanted to bring that up and point that out tonight as part of what we're required to do by the federal government, to bring those ramps that might appear to you right now to be fine, but they're not currently compliant.
So really accomplishing 2 things here. We're fixing the roadway, and then we've been sort of behind in our ADA compliant activity. And so this will get us more caught up with our ADA compliant activity. And I know it's odd in the coronavirus era, not sort of knowing what's going on financially, to be issuing a $3 million contract, but we took it from 4.7 down to 3.7. Brad, we've got the money set aside. This is money we saved for quite a while. It's well within the budget, and I know it's going to look a little odd, but it's business as unusual, and this is one we've been planning for a long time. So I think we've got the money. We're in good shape, and I think it's go. Any questions for Jake or?
Jake or Rob, either one, on the 88 ramps, what is the new standard? Are these going to be these new ones with all that block buildup and trip hazards and all this kind of alleys that you got to try and drive through if you're in a motorized cart? Those things are absolutely ridiculous. Is that what we're going to have to put in?
Well, there's different variations. The main thing that I know, and Jake, you can fill in the blanks, that we find that we're out of compliance is the slopes. So the transition slopes to the ramp, and also the detectable warning requirements. A lot of what you saw built in the 80s and 90s didn't have those detectable warnings, the little orange buttons we see.
Yeah, okay.
And so you'll see with new ramp construction longer transitions for somebody that's disabled to get from a sidewalk of this elevation down to the ramp to cross the street. So those are the main things. Jake, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've nailed it. The majority is the slopes, the cross slopes or the running slopes are too steep according to what the current standards are, and most of the ramps are also missing the yellow pad, the the warning surface for the visually impaired.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question. Is this the whole city you're going to be dealing with, or parts of the city, or what
So,
sections are we talking
I
about?
believe in the packet, it shows the streets that were overlaid, so it's just those streets. So what Jake was describing earlier is when we grind the street, the federal government says that grinding is no longer considered maintenance, and we have to replace the ramps wherever we did the overlay. So, so if we grind the street and really overlay, we have to do the ramps in that segment of that block. But it's only in this $3 million project. I don't remember the total miles of street here, but that's where those ramps are being replaced. Was that your question?
So, yeah, well, I'll have, Jake, would you just email to the council tomorrow the list of streets that are getting done? And send out that little, I got red lines on it or
Yeah.
something, just send it out to the council. So you'll get an
Yeah.
email. Because obviously we're doing 20 streets or something, and there's 200 streets in the city, and we're only doing the ones that need it, and they're spread all over the city in different spots based on what staff recommended. But there is a list of streets that are getting done, and we've seen it off and on. But if you just send out the final one.
Sure.
Okay.
What the mayor is referring to, you may have heard us talk about, is we have a pavement condition index. We call it the PCI. And so these streets were the ones that our program recommended being done now before they get any worse. And so last year we focused on collectors and arterials with our chip seal. And now this year we're focusing on these residential streets with this thin overlay. Thank you, Rob.
All right, any other questions for Rob or Jake? If not, I would entertain a motion. Who wants to go on the record spending $3 million?
Well, Your Honor, I'd make a motion for the city council to award the contract for the construction of the 2020 pavement preservation project 1913 to Central Washington Asphalt in the amount of $3,027,649 and authorize the mayor to sign the construction contract documents.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Kulas, second by Councilmember Hornby, to award the contract for the construction of the 2020 pavement preservation project number 1913 to Central Washington Asphalt in the amount of $3,027,649 and authorize the mayor to sign the construction contract documents. Any discussion?
Is
Hearing
this gonna-
none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And lastly, not lastly, we've got two more things. So we're going to hire Pertit to oversee the project. Jake, is that you?
Yes, so I'm also here to ask the city council approve and authorize the mayor to execute supplement number 4 with Pertit. Pertit was the consultant we hired to do all the initial investigations of boring the roads and coming up with which streets we should do within our budget within this project. And then they also did the design engineering, and so here we are asking to retain them for the construction inspection. It's going to be a pretty extensive inspection on this project. We're looking at about 100 working days, so 20 weeks, needing a person and a half full-time. Basically, as each of those ramps get formed up, the 200 ramps, the engineer on site will need to be inspecting and signing off on the slopes that they're going to build them with, and then also monitoring the pavement work as well, which is pretty widespread across the city. So that's the reason for the number here. It is a lot of man hours on this job.
And that number is included in the overall $3.7 million
All right.
project cost.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any questions for Jake or Rob? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for the city council to approve and authorize the mayor to execute supplement number 4 with Pertit for construction inspection services for the 2020 pavement preservation project number 1913.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Hornby, second by Councilmember Bailey to approve and authorize the mayor to execute supplement number 4 with Pertit for construction inspection services for the 2020 pavement preservation project number 1913. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, school crossing projects. So Jacob, you going to do that one?
Yes, sir. So the city applied for a Safe Routes to School grant back in 2018 to install some RRFBs, rectangular rapid flash beacons, at the intersection of Okanagan Avenue and Red Apple Road, as well as establish a school zone on Miller Street between Red Apple Road and Cherry. So the part of establishing that school zone will include radar speed feedback signs, as well as the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit signs with the flashing beacons to alert people when that's in effect. Due to the Safe Routes program, the way they operate, the city received funding about a year later in the summer of 2019, and we developed a design over the last several months that was advertised for bids on March 5th of this year. The city received 4 bids. Kind of tagging along with Jake, we used an online process for this project as well. 3 of the 4 bids we received were online, which was nice to see that process get used effectively. Golden Gate Electric out of Mercer Island was the low bidder at about 13.8% over the engineer's estimate. That said, that's a little bit misleading because we had additional money in the construction budget to account for that was much closer to the bids that we received. That said, we expect the project all in to be about 3% over the $123,000 budget, so about $3,000 over where we're at. Of that $123,000, all of it is grant funded through the Safe Routes to School program, so there is no match that's required. But like I said, with the overage, we expect to spend about $3,000 worth of the city's arterial streets funding to get this project to the finish line. The contract includes 20 working days. The plan is to have the project done by the time school starts in the fall. That said, there are some long lead times on some of these electrical items, so we'll need to see when the contractor is able to procure those items. But staff recommends that we award the project to Golden Gate Electric. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
So this will be 3 of the flashing beacons?
So it's one RRFB system and then 2 school zone beacons.
Got it. Thank you.
Jacob, this is Councilmember Kulas. I should have asked you this afternoon earlier, although I didn't think of it. You had presented one time that the rapid flashing beacons that were going to be installed on the sidewalk, either at Dakota or Montana, crossing Miller Street. Is that part of a different project?
It is. That was funded through a different grant source, and so we are still moving forward with design on that project. We expect to build that one next year at the intersection of Montana and Miller.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jacob? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I would like to motion the City Council award the construction contract for Miller School Zone and Okanagan Crossing Improvements Project number 1915 to Golden Gate Electric in the amount of $96,684 and authorize the mayor to sign the contract documents.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Cuevas, second by Councilmember Hornby to award the construction contract for the Miller School Zone and Okanagan Crossing Improvements Project number 1915 to Golden Gate Electric in the amount of $96,684 and authorize the mayor to sign the construction documents. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, gentlemen, on the phone. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
All right, Brooklyn, time for some CDBG discussion. I guess I'll sort of tee it off. There's sort of 2 components, I think, and Brooklyn can correct me and Glenn can correct me because most of the time I get it wrong. We did get some additional funding from the federal government just recently in the last 2 or 3 weeks. CDBG funding related to COVID, and they want to get it out very quickly into the community in one way or another. So we've had some other county commissioners and other folks sort of trying to get that money out very quickly. So I think we need to have a discussion about that. and then just sort of an update to the sort of our usual spend and a little bit discussion about sort of what council priorities might be for that. Is that right, Glenn? Did I tee that up
Correct, yeah.
okay?
Yep, very well, thank you.
So we're going to start with the emergency COVID money first.
Yes,
Okay. So is that going to be led by Glenn or Brooklyn?
that's Brooklyn. Go ahead, Brooklyn.
Hi, Brooklyn.
Hi. Is the PowerPoint up? The video on YouTube's delayed, so I'm like, not sure.
So they're gonna get, is there something that they're supposed to be looking at?
Should be a PowerPoint.
PowerPoint in our packet?
No, like for maybe it didn't get on the computer.
That's okay. I think we can.
I have the agenda items, so I can try and just talk through those if that's not available.
So let's just assume it's not available.
Okay. Will do. Hold on. Okay, so the conversation, there's 2 agenda items, and both of them are really just for direction from the council to move forward with. And so they're pretty tied together, so I'm going to try and be as clear as possible. So first is the COVID-19, which is CDBG CV funding. And the CARES Act provided this to all entitlements across the nation, and we are an entitlement. So we are receiving just under $140,000. This funding is kind of flexible, but it is designed to either prevent, prepare for any risk mitigation, and then also to respond to the COVID pandemic in our community. And they have been flexible on some of the normal requirements tied to CDBG funding. So this funding is going to come into our system as its own pot of funding. And so it won't be lumped in with our normal CDBG entitlement amount. We are able to do a reduced public comment. Normally, our public service cap, which is 15% of our award, that has been suspended. And so we could spend all of the funding on public services, which means overhead or staff support or like rent assistance or food banks, things like that, or technical assistance, things that would normally have a limit. We are able to spend all of the funding on that. This also allows for reimbursement of costs that might have already been incurred related specifically to COVID. And then it also allows for some flexibility in our consolidated plan, which is the next item on the agenda, but is right now expected to be submitted in August, depending on how the council wants to go about the funding priorities and next year's funding, because next year's entitlement is also eligible to be spent on CDBG CV projects. So there's a question around the timeline for our consolidated plan. We are required to document how we're going to utilize the funds, and so that can be done in 2 ways. We have the option to get the funding out as quickly as possible by amending our current 2019 annual action plan. And again, that would just be subject to the 5-day comment period, and we would have a goal of having that be done on May 14th at the May 14th meeting. The second option is to try and complete our 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan and the 2020 annual action plan early. Before we were planning on August 16th, but if we were to finish that early, we could write in there something called a pre-award cost that would allow us to start spending, upon approval of that plan, our $2020 to respond to COVID right now.
I think we want to talk about that potential early adoption in the second item, but I think our focus of the first item here was getting out early the funds, this under $140,000, as quickly as possible into the community. Isn't that correct, Brooklyn?
Yes. Yeah, the fastest way would be to amend our current annual action plan for 2019.
So that could get funds out and released, after that May 14th hearing.
I'm sort of in favor of the two-step process. I'm in favor of getting the 140 out as quickly as possible and then doing our normal process for the regular CDBG planning. I don't really want to take that money and throw it into the COVID pot because I think there's other things we could do with it. So I'm sort of inclined to do these things separately, get this 140, figure out the best way to get it out in the community as quickly as possible, and then sort of continue the work that Brooklyn's doing on the consolidated plan and make those decisions in August. That would be my preference. I don't see any reason to hurry up to get that money, that is normal CDBG money, and throw it in the COVID pot, at least based on what I'm seeing. I don't think that that's something I really want to rush out and do.
And
My personal preference.
And the 140, sort of what we've got, we've been reaching out to a variety of parties, to community action. Brooklyn's been reaching out. She can speak to who she's been coordinating with. We've been working with our homeless plan and homeless providers. Sort of what rose to the top of needs that we all know is a major crisis in our community are rent assistance for folks who need that component. Community action says that's their greatest need right now, and we could help a good number of folks with that. The other component, in addition to rent assistance, we were looking at maybe a need for food banks. The local food bank is okay, but we're hearing that maybe there may be needs elsewhere food-wise. But then the other component is, you might have heard that the Port District is doing some microloans to grants, not loans, to small businesses. So sort of what we thought we could provide for you is an option where we split the funds 50-50 between the microloans, where the Port District would be willing to provide those and issue those to small businesses. And then the other funds could be issued by community action. And the nice thing about that is they already have the framework to do that, and they could get the funds and they could quickly be able to disperse them in the community. And there's certainly a great need for that. So we could have, and we wanted to gauge what you thought of that. We'll continue to ask about the food needs to see if the food banks need anything, and we could bring that to your attention at the hearing and see if there is a need there. It might be okay, but our thought was to do it 50-50 microloans, and then the rapid rehousing. But you could pick one. I mean, you could do it in one bucket. If you have a preference now, we could take it to hearing and you could put it in one bucket, or is there any preference? How do you feel about those options? Do you have any clear preference one way or the other?
So I'll sort of chime in a little bit. I think obviously this money is new. The port got some money through their governor's strategic account. All the ports did, to try to get money out to local small businesses. So that money I think is going to come out in the next week or so. It sounds like we've got, I think, 10 local businesses getting $5,000 grants. The county also got the same CDBG money, and so they were trying to figure out, what do we do? Do we use community action and do sort of the things that Glenn has been talking about? Community action at that point wanted a 30% administration fee, and the county commissioner said, we're just going to give it to the port and let them just put more money into that program and get more money into small businesses, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. I think Glenn and Brooklyn might look at that money and say, businesses versus housing, maybe we have a more holistic approach to what that money should go for. And So I think that's why you're hearing them talk this idea about, well, do we follow what the county did and give some of the money to the port? Just to make sure that money gives to local businesses in Wenatchee? Or do you give it to community action? I'd hate to think them taking a 30% cut, so hopefully they've come up with a number that's quite a bit lower than that. Because I really sort of think, as I was sitting there watching the food bank work today, I was out there watching them put in food in 300 cars this morning, and wondering if some of the food bank stuff and maybe some of the rapid rehousing might actually be better if the port's money's already, or the county money's already going in the port. What I don't want to do is take 3 months to think about it, because the money needs to get out yesterday, and I want to make sure we have a plan that is flexible and quick, and let's get it going.
Only thing about the county monies going to the port, Frank, I do believe that they are saying that the money should only be used in the unincorporated area, not for the
Yeah,
city.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me that the port would do that, or that the
So
county
the
would
county,
do that. Yeah.
I believe that they have restricted it to just the unincorporated.
Unincorporated areas.
Yeah.
And these
But I
wouldn't
will-
have, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Glenn. I will say that the port did get news today, really good news, that the state has decided, the first round of monies that the state decided to distribute was $5 million throughout the state. And given the fact that they got 25,000 applications, now they have released 10 million. What we will get out of the 10 million in this area, we don't know yet. But 10 more million is coming for a second wave.
One of the things we've looked into and talked about the dollar amounts for administration and overhead that community action requested is, one, we can't do indirect costing. So that 10% off to the 30 they requested wouldn't be allowed under the CDBG funds. And then what our thought was is we would use existing contract for prevention for rent assistance, and say that they could choose that percentage that they get through our programs already, or they could submit cost accounting for timesheets not to exceed, in any case, 20% of the amount that's provided to them. So that was our thought process. And after this meeting, if rent assistance was of interest, we could reach out to community action and say, these are the parameters that you could receive the funds. Are you interested?
And then the discussion with Beth Stipe, was that about this COVID money as well? Her idea of trying to get us around a bigger table?
Yes, and our thought was we could, once we get some sort of direction from the council, we could then see what time is available between now and May 14th and see if we could link up to try to have that discussion, and if we can get that discussion before that meeting, provide that feedback for you on May 14th.
Okay. So what Beth's idea is that they're getting a lot of requests from the nonprofit community, and they're going to fund a bunch of that stuff. And we have some COVID money, and her thought was, if we got it around the table, and if the consensus was 20,000 or whatever, if it was CDBG eligible, we would do that out of our pot. And if she found a good organization that wasn't CDBG, or a program that wasn't, she could pay it out of her pot. And maybe if we did the dance, we would get it in better spots, bigger ways. I think it's a little bit what I'm sort of seeing, not on the nonprofit sector or at both sectors, it's the wild, wild west, right? Everyone's applying for everything. And what may end up happening is one deserving organization gets nothing, and one deserving organization gets everything. And maybe the Beth Stipes approach is, hey, we're sort of, hey, you got this and you got that and we gave you that. Hey, this other organization needs this and it is CDBG, and just maybe a cohesive look at that. So that's another option that we have. I'm sort of wondering if the governor's given extra money, if the port gets extra money plus the county, I wonder if that business money is enough and we should take it a different direction. Maybe take half of it with community action and half with something with Beth to sort of figure out. I mean, maybe that's a better approach. I don't know.
Yeah, we can explore that with her, and our intent would be to contact her after this, after we get a little bit of feedback. And
is waiting 3 weeks okay? I mean, there's part of me that sort of wants to go throw it on the sidewalk right now, and,
We could, if you want.
because we're not
to
meeting
hold-
again as a council for 3 more weeks.
Yeah, if you'd like to have a special meeting, we could work quicker.
Okay.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
I will have to amend our consolidated and annual action plan and get it submitted and entered in. And the timeline for my ability to do that is and to the public comment for the 5 days is probably going to be about 3 weeks.
Okay, so you're saying the fastest we can do it is 3 weeks anyhow?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes. I don't feel confident that the process would be so easy that I could get it done much faster than that.
We have great trust in you, Brooklyn, to get it done way
Thank
quicker than that.
I mean, if I'm given that direction.
I know.
She's the one with all the experience dealing with the feds, so
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't second guess her on anything on that.
So, along sort of piggybacking onto that, since we can't do a PowerPoint, is the broader discussion on the consolidated plan, which Brooklyn's been working at, and she'll have some discussion on that feedback that our consultant David Stahlheim's been working on. But there's the ability to use the next cycle's fund for COVID. We don't have to. But that's part of that discussion with Beth Stipe is we could be finding out more about what the needs are. And, depending on the needs, we could report back to you and you could make, some decisions on whether, given the needs out there, we would like to use next year's funds or to address community needs or not. I know one thing that staff from the homeless program and myself would like to throw into that pot would be some fund money for potentially paying for architectural and consultant services to help with the low barrier shelter siting. So there's a variety of things like that to talk about.
So I'll just throw this out there. I don't know what the council wants to do, but my recommendation would be you and Brooklyn and me and Laura and maybe one other council member bring recommendations back here for the next meeting to adopt with the 5-day look. That sound fair, guys?
I'll join that.
Yeah, it just seems like, I don't know if we need a motion, but I think just direction that we need to do some work and bring back some recommendations.
And maybe by then we have a better sense of what kind of money's coming in from the state
Yeah.
to the region too.
I'll throw my 2 cents in here. One of the things, I guess what's starting to, the picture that in my mind is starting to appear here that obviously like a lot of things that, there's the feds are throwing money and just kind of literally throwing it on the sidewalk. And so I think it's really incumbent that we take a deep breath and kind of get this organized rather than just kind of just arbitrarily picking something and say, this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, it seems like that there's a lot of lobbying and certainly a lot of pressure being put on feds in the state as well to get money into the business community, into their hands, and I have no problem with that. But I think my take on this in terms of the CDBG monies is to get that into the hands of individual citizens, people that are really in need and need it. You can't make a payment, for whatever, you can't rental, whatever it happened, food, whatever kind. I want to see that money get. I don't want this to turn out to be, and I think you kind of alluded to it, Your Honor. The other day in the news, there, Shake Shack, got $10 million, from the Fed. They gave it back, but there's a lot of big corporations that are siphoning money out of the system, and it's not the mom and pop grocery store that's getting the money. It's they're just better organized and got more lawyers. So, no offense intended. So to me, this whole thing has got to be about getting as much help as we can into the hands of the people that need it in our community.
Right. Which is why I think
Businesses are going to be helped. They're going to see their pot of money. But it's the anonymous citizen out there that's struggling and they need help and we need to help them.
That's why our staff has got a more holistic approach, right? They're pro-business, but they also understand the other needs that you're talking about,
Yeah.
which is why I think maybe some combination of working with Beth and using the community action might get us get us a bit of both shots to get it where it needs to go.
Would it be possible to meet next week so that we can give Brooklyn enough time to
Yeah.
make those changes?
Yeah, does any of the council members want to sit with us on that, or? I will. So Travis said, so me, Travis, Glenn, and Laura will find a time in Brooklyn next week.
Is that okay, Brooklyn?
Just say yes.
Okay, I think that's a
Yep,
yes
she
for
said.
Brooklyn.
You said
I
yes?
heard her.
Okay, perfect. Brooklyn, you still there? Because I can't hear you. Are you on mute?
I was on mute.
And did you say
Sorry.
yes?
Yes, I did.
Perfect.
Now, there's a second component that we wanted to bring to you.
Yeah, so now we're on item I, which is
Yeah.
our normal community development block grant consolidated plan.
With essentially the findings from Dave Stahlheim in partnership with Brooklyn on the consolidated plan update, and you requested that staff come back before you with a little more information so you could provide us feedback as Brooklyn puts that together and begins a public process. So with that, do you want to talk about that, Brooklyn? Brooklyn, are you there?
Turn yourself off of mute, Brooklyn.
Oh my gosh. You know, I'm way better with Zoom. So in February, David Solheim and I brought to the council a lot of information around CDBG and the consolidated plan. And then I followed up with an email that gave a summary and some maps around that in mid-March. And so this is kind of was going to be our in-person follow-up, but also the request from council was to provide a more condensed recommendation around focus areas, the priorities, and then also funding options. And so we kind of condensed that into the memo in front of you, and I did realize while I was creating my PowerPoint that some of the numbers in the memo are in one of the tables are off. We changed that a whole bunch, and so those are off just a little bit. The number, if you want to do math on the table, should be considering $237,000 annually every year. So that should be the number in there, not 239. So with that, when we look at consolidated plan, we are looking at administrative support with a 20% cap, public services with a 15% cap, and then projects, which is essentially the remaining amount of the award every year. And the projects are the part that we have the most flexibility in. That is where we've historically done the sidewalks. The public services is where we have historically done like the Literacy Council and the cleanups that support funding code enforcement.
And on the 20% administrative, if I could, we don't always use that full amount, but for example, this year we are because Brooklyn's writing fair housing plan and writing a consolidated plan. And so she's spending that time and more in that program this year. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. And that's a cap, so we don't always, we can spend up to that. And we don't have to spend money on those items, but we are maxed out how much we can if we choose to. So the focus areas that we have kind of consolidated down to cover administration, about 20%, public services, and the recommendation is to go forward with the consolidated plan with the assumption that each year we would continue trying to max out those two caps. And then underneath the projects, which is any remaining funds after those caps have been accounted for, would be some focus areas that are fairly similar to what we've had over the last 7 years in those consolidated plans, but a little bit different dynamic based on the conversation from February. The first one would be to look at phasing out code enforcement. There's a little comment in the memo. HUD has been releasing notices around changes and new requirements and assumptions to funding code enforcement. And right now we use it as a salary for the code enforcement department, and that is not likely going to be an easy option going forward, just based on the feedback that HUD has been providing. So if we were to phase that out the first year of our 2020 program, it would actually be the 2021 year of the city's budget, because our program year starts in October. So we wouldn't look at alternative funding for, it's $36,700 that we've always funded in code enforcement, and that need would be funded through 2021 and then would be looked at alternatively in 2022.
And just to note that that wasn't a general support for code enforcement. That was with focused areas that we've been using it. But again, as Brooklyn said, they're getting tighter constraints on doing that.
Mm-hmm. So then the next category would be looking at housing, and this would be a really broad focus area. It would include affordability. So can we support gaps within funding for our homeless program? Could we help try and fund some development that includes affordable housing or support through infrastructure? Sidewalks has been a big part of our project, but they've been kind of an absolute project, not connected really to any adjacent projects. And so we could put public infrastructure underneath housing. And so if there was a housing development going in, and to make it pencil out, they needed support with utilities or our sidewalk requirements, things like that, we could use CDBG funding to help reduce their development costs of that. And so those facility improvements would be kind of lumped under housing, trying to make sure that they are connected and incentivized next to affordable housing. Then the next one is economic development, and that would be focused around low-income businesses that are also micro-enterprise, so 5 employees or less. And that can be in the form of financial support for starting or getting a business going, technical assistance so that businesses know how to operate, and also facility improvement. So if there's an area in our community that if the facility itself or the frontage of the building was improved, it would be a benefit to the community around it. We can do things like that. So if buildings are becoming dilapidated or even our code enforcement issue, we can look at supporting businesses in that way as well. We had mentioned in February that there's an opportunity to use Craft 3 as a partner, and if they were to be a partner in our projects, the housing and economic development focus areas, there would be a little bit more flexibility in what we could do. And so that's something worth looking at if we do want to maintain these broader topics. And then the last one I actually put in there, I've been in a couple different conversations over the last month, and just putting in statement around community response. One of the biggest delays in funding right now is having to update plans, kind of as I alluded to earlier. And so if we can have language that is already written in as a community to respond to emergency situations at a national or local level, we can learn from this lesson with COVID and have that in there so that it wouldn't have to hopefully be updated were something to happen. And that could include like flood, fire, earthquake, like disaster recovery response as well if we needed it to. And then finally, there are 2 things that are worth considering. These would be more admin than an actual project, but establishing a neighborhood revitalization strategy area, which is a NERSA. Our South Wenatchee community would very likely qualify there, and the funds become really flexible in terms of housing development and economic opportunities if a NERSA is established. And so that would be underneath that 20% admin cap. And then also looking into a home program between Chelan, Douglas, Grant, and Okanagan counties, and just kind of facilitating that conversation. And what could that mean for our community in terms of bringing almost $1 million annually into our region, whether it's for homeless support or for new development and housing. So that's a whole broad range. So that would also be underneath that admin cap as well. And if that program is here, it has its own admin allowance and could actually be managed by a different entity if Wenatchee didn't want to, or if there was an agreement among the 4 counties to have an alternative facilitate that program.
So you have the last 2 items that Brooklyn mentioned that are options that the community can choose to pursue and partner with other jurisdictions on. That would be something new that would be above and beyond our community development block grant funds. But then you have the items, the categories that Brooklyn talked about. And we started really broad. You had Dave Stahlheim speak to you about, a variety of options. And we've tried to narrow those down, given the realities of really the limited amount of funds that we have and some of the interests that council members have spoken to. And if these categories or revisions there tonight are okay, the next step in the process is we'd be developing our public participation plan and trying to get specific goals and guidance in the plan to direct those funds on a yearly basis. And you as a body then will see that public hopefully be part of and see those guiding goals and be able to direct those and make changes to those so that on a yearly basis you have some comfort level on how those funds are allocated. But this gives us some guidance for Brooklyn, who's been very productive at home, to continue to work on this. So I guess our question is, how do you feel about the general categories Brooklyn has provided to you? Are those acceptable? Do you want some tweaks on them, additions to them, with the understanding that you'll have oversight on the goals, the directing goals and guidance on those as we put our plan together?
So I'm offended about the code enforcement issue because that is something that we rely on. It gives us the ability to have 2 code enforcement officers, and there are real problems all over our community with code enforcement. Probably one of the largest complaints I get regularly is just the conditions in neighborhoods and people parking, and it's a hard job to do. And to push all of that to our general fund, given what we know today, that makes me a bit angry. So that's just a political statement that somehow I'm not going to be able to use code enforcement or use CDBG money for code enforcement. And second, I do like the projects that we've done for sidewalks in South Wenatchee. As much as it takes 3 or 4 years to get a project together, I do think it provides great benefit to South Wenatchee or the spots where we're building them. That doesn't have to be South Wenatchee, other spots qualify. That's my personal opinion. I would like to be able to help with housing in some manner. I don't know how you do that effectively, but those are my sort of kind of where I'm at. Nothing makes me feel better than to go down Chelan and be able to see our 2 blocks of projects on both sides and see how those housing units are looking nice and the yards are being taken care of and people are parking the way they're supposed to. And that goes a long ways. I know it takes us 100 years to do all of that area, but boy, it's nice to see that on the ground.
So an interest in neighborhood revitalization, not just in support of housing for infrastructure.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree. A couple of comments. I would agree with that. In terms of helping housing projects, I think that's fine as long as there's some pretty strict guidelines so that these things don't morph into, say, market rate housing. Eventually, in other words, somebody's using CDBG to finance their development costs, and then in 7, 10, 12, 15 years, whoops.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have problems with the other folks who do development of market rate housing if you're doing that. And secondly, as the mayor said, and as I've mentioned before, it's fine that we have these other grant programs for sidewalks, safe routes to schools and complete streets. The benefit of the CDBG is that we don't have to go to anybody to beg for money to do a sidewalk. We decide here.
Yeah.
And whether it's be, my pet one on Sunset, connecting the Housing Authority's project to Fifth Street, which gets students to Orchard Middle School, we don't have to compete with anybody. We can just say, let's close those gaps.
Yeah.
And it's going to help that neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks, that's eligible. Yeah, I agree with you on the code enforcement stuff, particularly of being able to use funds to run programs that take people to run programs. It's kind of a little bit of a slap around there. I'm glad some of this is pared down because Mr. Stallheim was pretty clear that there are some pretty exciting programs you could do with CDBG, particularly if you got 10 times the amount of funding that we get.
Yeah. Bigger cities and yeah.
Yeah, and they're not going to work for us. And so I think that it would seem that if we're able to do some of these projects, and I'll just say it, spread it geographically through the areas that need it. It isn't just one particular area that we might look at for a storefront redevelopment. There might be other opportunities in other areas. We don't put everything into one basket. And whether we do that annually or whether we say, this is our 5-year plan, and we kind of conveyor belt things. So if you need something in one area in years 1 and 2, there's a concentration of capital going into it, and then another one for years 3 and 4, that we do that. And I love the concept of leveraging. I'm somewhat interested in how you would do a multi-county thing, particularly if county commissioners are saying they don't want any of their money spent in incorporated areas. It doesn't bode well for looking at this community-wide, but I'm kind of interested in how, again, we might leverage with others to do significant projects in our region.
Yeah, and that's a different pool of funds, and you come to an agreement, whether it's us or someone would run it, and you work, your agreements, how those funds are distributed or rotated through the 4 counties. But a whole new set of funds. We've been watching that for some time, and it's sort of interesting.
I agree, Your Honor, with the code enforcement piece of it. I'd hate to see that we have to cut that back, or that has made an incredible difference in our community from what it was 10 years ago to what we're doing right now. I mean, it's different out there because of it, and I think that has been a very good use of these funds. The other thing, and maybe kind of follow up on Mark, if I'm hearing what you were saying. To me, there's these funds could be used to maybe look at, for lack of a better term, kind of like a redevelopment zones. There's areas that are ready to be changed or rolled over or upgraded or whatever. And while I'm really proud of the sidewalk work that we've done up to this point, and I'd like to keep doing, there's a lot more to do. But I think that, somehow to have some targeted areas, and this is an area we expect to change, but we're not going to gentrify, South Wenatchee. That's a community but there are things, there's substandard housing, there's a lot of things that need to be corrected, and that's to me kind of another area that we need to kind of look at, rather than just a sidewalk at a time here and there, but actually a plan to get infrastructure that would facilitate redevelopment and promote low-income housing or affordable housing, whichever term you want to use.
So do you guys have enough sort of?
Yeah, I think that's been really helpful. And with respect to code enforcement, that's what Brooklyn's read and heard, and that's what our consultant provided. One thing we can do, though, is we can do a formal letter and request an interpretation from a supervisor, and just try one more time
Right.
and just try to push, see if we can push the envelope and see what they say. We'll try before we see you next time on this. We'll see if we can push that.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Brooklyn?
Brooklyn, anything else you need from us?
No, I think just wanted to provide you guys in kind of a next step for the comp plan. There's a pretty heavy community engagement side, so I'll probably be working on figuring out how to do that online. But I think after what Glenn said, once we get that kind of understanding solidified, the next process will be bringing these kind of overarching ideas to the community and getting feedback on project ideas, but then also feedback on the focus areas as well.
Perfect.
Well, I think it would be really nice if we could, when we're getting that community feedback, if we could get feedback of how the community has liked what we've done with the code enforcement, because I'm with the mayor. I think it's going to be really rough to have to do away with what we've been doing.
Yeah, and we don't
Would
necessarily,
it be helpful?
we don't really have to do away with it. It just, whether it becomes a general fund obligation or a CDBG fund obligation, I think we use the CDBG money and then we put some general fund in and that gets our second guy, right? Or girl, whatever. It ends up.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
I
the
don't
part that-
disagree with that. But
yeah.
again, I think we're thinking that it was a good use of the funds for, the betterment of the community, and it just worked. So
Yeah.
disappointed to see that go, and I'd like the public feedback on that if we could.
Yeah, and would it be helpful in our follow-up to include the information that HUD is providing? Because
Yeah.
the federal direction is really what makes it,
Absolutely.
the way that we're set up, difficult, because we don't have a lot of funding set aside to support the code enforcement activity. So that's our biggest challenge, I think, right now with that.
Yep, and we'll follow up with a request from a supervisor. We'll figure out who that person is, and we'll put down what we do and the importance that it is for our community and see what they say.
Good.
All right. Thanks, Brooklyn. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
All right, mayor's report. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I would say, obviously, we had our Public Works ED meeting this week, and that went well. Laura and I do have pretty regular phone conversations with most of the department heads. Just sort of the way we're doing it now. We just sort of talk over the phone. We've been talking a little bit about the 4th of July. Obviously, that's been a big celebration around here, and I've been talking with Shiloh, who is still in North Carolina or South Carolina, one of the Carolinas. She's been there a month quarantined. But I think the consensus is that we are going to still have a fireworks show, but we're probably not going to have bands and 15,000 people down at the park. So I think if that meets with your guys' approval, I think that's sort of the direction we're headed. I think we, as Mr. Bailey would know and others, we did have one year where there was no fireworks display at all and almost lost the city. So I think even if we can't have 10 or 15,000 of our closest friends down there, at least a display where you could get up on the hills or wherever in your neighborhood and watch it is probably something that we're going to look towards doing. So the reason we're talking about it now is the down payment on the fireworks has to go out in the next week or so. So it looks to me like we'll be making the decision to put the down payment down. At least we'll have a show. And I doubt that we have anything stage and bands and the sorts of things we've had in the past. So just wanted you to know that's sort of where we're going. If you have a different thought, let me know. But I think that's sort of the way this is going to go down.
Well, if you can't shoot them off with a storm in your garage.
Yeah, well, and again, I think it's as much a public safety issue as anything to say that we're going to have a fireworks display and you can watch it from your wherever you need to watch it from. Just don't blow up your own garage. Laura, what else was I supposed to talk about? You had other things for me? That was the one? Okay, you sure there wasn't more? Okay. And again, I said this to the Finance Committee, and Laura and Brad and I talked today a little bit about, I keep reading in these other cities are laying off people, and Everett and Issaquah and Sammamish and Seattle, and everyone's getting, and I'm sort of looking at Brad and Laura going, what am I missing? I mean, and I think the consensus is we're still fine. We're got good reserves. We've made good decisions in the past. We've got good money in our rainy day fund. And so at this point, there's really nothing for us to do other than just do what we're doing. I know Dave's going to get a little bit more parks crew out, get the grass mowed a little bit more often and do some of that. Street crews still aren't out working, although we must have something going on, an emergency of some variety. We have a crew in there by the one-way. Is it our crew?
Well, we've got the sewer job there on Second.
Okay, that's what that was. Okay, yeah. So that's our crews, or the crews working there.
Out there, sweeping streets. We've got our weed control program underway. And
Okay.
The crew are anxious to get back to work.
I know they are. And any sort of next steps with that? Is there anything that,
I think we're waiting for the governor's notice.
okay,
And I think we'll probably talk as directors how we bring back staff.
okay. Most of that really falls in your lap because everyone else is working or working from home. So most of that is the road crews and the utility crews. And so we'll be looking to you for direction about how we get them out and get them back into the system.
I asked all my supervisors and managers today to start thinking about how they could bring back larger groups, what they could do, where they could do individual type tasks, or drive separately to a project and work with basic. They're thinking about those things.
And I know facilities was upstairs today. Obviously, even when things get back to normal, I think we'll end up with some fiberglass in front of the gals that are collecting utility bills, probably something out at Public Works as well in terms of some screening. And maybe something up at City Hall. Just, right now you could walk in and just walk right by Tammy, and maybe, I think Laura would feel a little more comfortable if there was something that kept people from having to just walk back there. So I think there's a few things we're looking at just from a safety perspective, and in light of the fact that at some point we'll be going back to something close to business as usual, we hope. And I really think that's just about it. I've been on a couple of phone calls, Health Department today. I don't know if you were on it. Really nothing new. Most of it's sort of centered around testing now. How do you get enough people tested? How do you know? That seems to be where the big push is. And then I am getting a lot of emails and feedback about, Mayor, you need to open up the city no matter what the governor says. And I tend to ignore most of those. I just don't think that's the right spot for us to be. So I think we're looking to his guidance, and the chamber does want to get a little group together to sort of start talking about how we get, what's it going to look like and what can businesses do. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a go here. I was talking to one of my friends who owns a restaurant, and he just said, if you want me to put 50% of the people in my restaurant, I'm not going to make any money, right? I make money on those, right? Between about 60 and about 90% is where my profit is. If I got to run a half full, I ain't going to make any money. And so if you keep having those restrictions, it's going to be harder and harder. Retail might be able to do a little bit better by sort of the social distancing. I'm not sure how a restaurant does it, to be honest with you. So it'll be interesting to see how those rules sort of come out, and sort of where we can play.
I'll be really interested to see how it all rolls out as far as conventions.
Yeah. Might be a while.
I know, yeah. I've got groups now calling to cancel for September and October.
I think until there's some sort of a vaccine or
Yeah.
some sort of regular testing, right? I don't know how you put 400 of your closest friends at the convention center for lunch.
I agree.
Yeah,
It's just really,
It really seems that the two-part testing, do you have it, and do you have the antibodies?
Right.
And tracking.
Yeah.
Tracking is so critical, and I know that some people are kind of taking pot shots at folks suggesting that we need more resources for tracking, but we got to figure out, obviously, folks that are asymptomatic are spreading
Yeah.
the joy,
Yeah.
and without tracking where they've been and the contacts.
Yep.
Mhm.
I'm looking at today's statistics, and by and large, by over twice, the age group that has the most cases is the 20-year cohort is the 20 to 39-year-old.
Mhm.
It's not the boomers.
Right, yeah.
This asymptomatic out.
Yeah, so again, Linda, I'm with you. I don't know how that sort of ends up looking. I don't know how
I don't know either.
when the next time there'll be a hockey game or a concert at the Town Toyota Center. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those sort of bigger groups that I think it's going to be a while before you start seeing that.
I do too. And my biggest concern for all of it is, okay, we open things back up and we allow these public events and all of a sudden we have another pandemic on our hands. And it could be worse the second go around.
The 1918
Yeah.
influenza charts.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was the second one was worse than the first
Second and
one.
the third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of things to say about this because I've been really thinking about it, not only from the current perspective, but also into the future, looking at, because it's most likely we will have another second wave. I mean, we will have another wave of this. We will. And I know that, we have to wait around for a vaccine because none of us are scientists, right? But I keep going back to that question of what can we do? And I know that the state has a lot of power, and I get that. And I know that the governor is the one who says when we reopen and whatnot. But we have two systems here that we have to somehow balance. Because we have the healthcare system, God forbid that goes, broke. We don't want to break the healthcare system, but we don't want to break our economic system either.
Yeah.
And so, I keep going back to we need testing, and the testing, according to Barry from the health department, we're not getting the test kits over on this side of the mountains.
Right.
I keep talking to people over on the other side of the mountains. They have plenty of test kits.
Yeah.
They don't have the issues we're having on this side of the mountains. And so I'm thinking, it would help if we can get maybe some of the mayors in our area all together to have a conference call with the governor and say, hey, we're over here too, we're here, we exist. Because we need testing on this side of the mountains and we're not getting them. We're still short on test kits here. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other, as somewhat to mitigate this balance I'm talking about these two systems, the healthcare system and the economic system. And the second part of it is, what can the city do? And recently I came across some posts about wearing masks and how much lower the risk becomes when everybody's wearing masks. And I'm thinking, okay, if people want to open because they want to protect the economic system, and other people don't want to open because they want to protect the healthcare system. And maybe we could find some sort of, middle ground, and maybe masks is the way to solve the issue. And maybe the city should bring some sort of, ordinance where everybody temporarily has to wear masks. To bring down that risk, because and here I am. I have my mask and it's in the car. Right. I should have brought it in. But,
Same here.
But I love the fact that Mark is wearing them, Tim's wearing them, Jim's wearing them. We should all be wearing masks because every time we speak, we're spewing out our saliva, and I think that's one way maybe that this could be sped up, and that could be the way also to minimize that second wave, because sometimes they say that second wave coming into the future is worse than the first wave. And so, I think there are things that we as a city can do, we as a region can do. But one of them, I think, should be that all the mayors should get together and put some pressure on at the state level and say, hey, where are our kids? Because I heard, or I'm sorry, I read today about Yakima. The news came out that Yakima per capita of 100,000, they're the fastest growing. Mm-hmm. They have more cases than even in the west side of the mountains. You know?
And Benton County has the highest death rate.
Yeah.
The Tri-Cities.
Yeah. So, I mean,
So
I think there are things we can do, Frank.
Yep. So I'll work on the test kit issue. I think that's a good, and I'll talk with some other mayors about trying to get that done. I think that the mask issue, I was talking with Shiloh yesterday about this idea, if we're going to open up business in downtown Wenatchee, whether we would do it ahead of the governor's request or at the same time, that maybe the request is that if you're working in a downtown retail store, you're wearing a mask and you're not allowed to go in the store unless you're wearing a mask. And you just sort of,
Exactly.
Let's do it.
and if you don't want to, if you don't want to wear a mask, then just don't go shopping. It's fine. And those that aren't wearing masks say, oh, I'm going to go into the store, I'm going to take a mask. Now you get to the issue as, what are you supposed to wear, the 95 mask? Can you wear a homemade mask? Do you wear the 37 mask? What's the right kind of mask? I mean, those sorts of, I get a little confused about, and do the stores have them in front if they're, hey, there's your portable mask, put one on. I mean, those sorts of things. I think that's a reasonable way to open up business, which is just say downtown retail is open, except for you got to wear a mask. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
And here's the other reason why too, Frank, too, because, supplies are limited right now.
Right.
We want people to be prepared for that second wave. And right now is the time to prepare for that second wave, not when it hits us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you said it. This man, they didn't do it.
Yeah. We can't really enforce it. We can't make it mandatory for people to wear them. But I think
But we could get the businesses
Yes.
to buy into it.
Yeah.
You want to revitalize the city with economic growth.
Yeah.
Make people wear masks to your businesses.
Yeah, I'm fine. I've been thinking about that for a while, how you implement it and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And whether you do it ahead of the governor's order is another thing that I think would be interesting, right? You say, we're open up for business and everyone's got to wear a mask and see what they say. I'm not ready to do that yet, but that's a thought that I had, which is that would protect everybody, right?
Yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to see at least what the tri-state compact discussion is going to come up with.
Yeah.
For our coastal compact with Oregon and California. It's a pretty high-powered medicine and science people and logistics people working on this.
Yeah. Eventually, it's going to be on your phone, and you're going to be able to say, where you've been, and
Mm-hmm.
I think South Korea already is doing that. They're tracking people that way through their phones.
You have a bunch of people in this community that don't want to be tracked doing anything.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
I just have one thing I've been mulling about for about a month now. And I'll just say, I thought, well, the best way to say this would probably be in an email, but then I think of our city clerk who has to manage all these public records. So I won't do it. I want to thank the mayor and his staff for what they've done with our council meetings. And I don't want to sound like I'm really happy that we have short council meetings now because of the environment. That isn't the issue. The issue is that I'm sure that there are items that the staff would love to be telling us about what they're doing, either at our work sessions or more here. But exciting projects and fun things that they're working on. And then, let's face it, some of the things that are not so much fun that happen and to report on. And I appreciate the fact that it's been filtered out so we can get down to our core stuff. And I guess just letting the directors know and their staff that once this settles a bit, we look forward to hearing about those exciting projects that you're working on that you've had to hold inside. And that we appreciate that they're holding that inside, and we look forward to hearing about those good things and maybe the things that didn't turn out so good.
And I appreciate you guys giving us the confidence to sort of do stuff because we're all in this at sort of doing the best we can with what we have. And again, I try to keep you guys notified when I can. And again, I've told Laura this, those committee meetings are really important because that's the way I get engaged with the council members, both the Public Works and the Finance Committee about things that are going on. So don't want to get you guys caught by surprise on anything. And so I do work really hard on making sure we have those meetings so you guys are talking about the same stuff we're talking about. So occasionally stuff will slip through the cracks, but hopefully not very often. All right. So with that said, 3 weeks. So,
Really?
3 weeks, yeah. Because it's the
I don't even
fifth.
know what day we're on.
It's the fifth Thursday, will be next Thursday, and then the first Thursday we don't meet, so this is our normal Apple Blossom.
Yeah, we don't meet
2
on
weeks
Apple
out.
Blossom.
Yeah. So,
It's on our minds.
yeah. All right, everybody, we're adjourned.